Okay, morning everyone. Nice to have you all here. So, just to recap what we're covering, master your sales funnel, so media strategy and measurement, and learning how to improve the marketing funnel with tracking and digital media alignment. So, this is what we are covering. So, the latest funnel methodology, how to identify the steps in your marketing funnel, how micro conversions and events work, how to track your funnel using GA4, and how to create a media strategy for your funnel. So I found that when working with any strategy, it's very difficult if marketing works in isolation and for marketing to say this is what we want to achieve or these are our objectives. It's so important that business aligns with marketing so that marketing can go, well, we actually want to achieve what the business is trying to achieve and we want to amplify that. You don't want to just be seen as a support cost center that's not showing any value. And ultimately, it's going, what does the business want to achieve? How's marketing going to support that? But the key thing that business can help with is, they engage with clients, they understand who they're trying to target as well. So, marketing to help pull that together and that it's integrated so that whatever you're doing is talking to the client needs and it's not assuming who to speak to and where. And I think that's really key, especially when mapping out a strategy, a media strategy, not to assume which channels to be on or who to target. And what do people want to track? And I think ultimately, it's all about, is my budget allocated correctly? And am I adding value and insights to business to show return on investment? And I think that's a big thing is that from a marketing perspective, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice your budget. But where are you getting the best value? Where are you getting the best return? And we'll talk through that in the funnel because it is very easy to just throw money at different channels without actually seeing any value or return. But just to have that we out there and we're driving that awareness, but is that actually showing any return on investment? So I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is the classic funnel, and ultimately it falls downwards. And it's you basically you're expecting your customer to just be pulled down into this loyalty conversion phase. So it's pulling down into this awareness, consideration, conversion, loyalty, and gravity will automatically just pull your customer through this. And it seems quite an easy approach and funnel, but we've flipped it around, and ultimately we've got to try and get the user to work their way up and to defy that gravity and to actually work hard to get that customer to work up to get that macro conversion. So you'll see um, as it builds up, you've got various micro conversions where you want people to that potential customer or existing customer to engage in different parts of the funnel, where it will ultimately culminate in a macro conversion. So, how do you plan in terms of what you're going to track? So, if we look at the website from a macro perspective, and what's that ultimate goal? Is you want them to click on any call to action leading to a get in touch form, starting the get in touch form, a submission that they've completed it, user login. So this is where you've got that user actually coming into your ecosystem and you're getting them to fill in their details and you can engage them and they're gonna submit their details. So that's your macro actions on the website. But in order to get them there, you also need to plan for your micro. So what are you tracking that will lead to the macro conversion? Are they scrolling on your page? I think that's a really key micro conversion that you can track in GA4 is the scroll depth, um, which also helps with content and UX development. Video engagement, content engagement, so the time they're spending on the page and what they're engaging with, any notification banner engagement, file, do- file download, so do you have any PDFs that you're downloading, tracking the top navigation. So where are they going on the site? And then planning KPIs based on this. So how do you want to measure these? Is it number of call to action clicks? Is it your conversion rate? How many people are clicking compared to form submission? Scroll depth percentage by website content. So then you can go, is it 25%, 50%, 75%? The time on your content heavy pages. So are they invested in what you're saying? Are they engaging? Do they really care? Is what you're saying speaking to them? And going back to what I said, tapping into the customer's needs. Conversion rates, so file download, page views, conversion rates, so content engagement versus website visits. So there's different ways to skin this, but ultimately it goes back to what are your objectives? What is the purpose of your website? So we're talking about doing this funnel based on your website for now. And what is it, what is that ultimate goal? Is it um, a form submission, or is it existing customers logging in? So looking at that. So just revisiting this. So to go, here's our funnel that we flipped around, looking at micro and macro conversions. And this is an example of how it could look like, because it's all good and well talking theory, but saying, okay, if you are looking at this from a website perspective, you can say from a very bottom layer, all visitors come to your site, and it's page views. Then you delve deeper into, you're going to scroll depth, header navigation, footer navigation, your video tracking, any outbound links. Then as you go higher up in the funnel, that user's more entrenched. So are they downloading a file? Are they clicking a talk to us? How fast are you ready to go to the call to action? Clicking on an email address, and then again going into a get in touch form start, get in touch form submit, newsletter sign up. Now they're actually giving you their details, and then macro could be they signing in as a customer. So again, showing how this can work based on the funnel. But again, is your website optimized to get them up there? Are you tracking what's working, what's not working? Is the UX optimal? Is the content talking to them to push them up in the funnel? I'm going to hand over to Sheldon.
Cool. So to make it a bit more practical, like with real examples, I like the fact that Elena referred to UX. So I chose our website as a test case. So the navigation at the top, and I thought that's very important to highlight, is majority of traffic, if they know your brand, will land on your homepage. Your navigations are really important and a useful point to send your marketable people where you want them to go. So like for us, a really big point is the contact us. And you can see from the screenshot there, our contact us button is different from the rest of our navigation because we want to guide people there. That's like a whole UX thing all on its own. But tracking that event is a micro conversion. As much as it's a very important step. It's actually not the biggest one. The biggest one is actually getting you to fill out the form. And I'm hoping that a lot of people filled out the form here because to get to this webinar. But for our macro conversion, you move from your micro conversion to your macro conversion. So starting on clicking the contact us button and then moving on to the main form, where if you look at our contact us page, it is just a form. So getting people to finish the form is the only objective of their page. The other things, so on the side there, you'll see we've got the hello at NightJarr email address, our address, and our follow us links. Those are also micro conversions. So the nice thing with this moment is that if a person lands on the contact us page and doesn't fill out the form, we do have micro conversions to check what else are they doing. It's not just a page with nothing else on it. And that's a very big thing to know, is that if a user is not converting on your macro conversion, are you providing micro steps to get them closer? So me being the techie, I had to have a slide here with this in it. So this is what GTM looks like. You'd have your GA4 configuration tag, and then for every event that you want to track that's custom to you into your site, you will need to set up an event explicitly for it. So we've got two different events here. You can see it's highlighted in green. Contact page view. So when a user lands on the contact page, it is tracked as a page view event, like standard tracking that exists already. But we want to know that a person has seen that contact page, and we can use that event in other reports. When the user completes the form, you'll see that contact form submit occurs, and we have a thank you page that it fires on. So the contact page submission is actually a page view for the thank you. Those two events go into our reporting, which we can then use wherever we want. So creating audiences or creating specific reports for it, we can then use these events. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And that's something I learned very early on. So this is what it looks like in GA4. When you have your events, you have a contact view, so you can select the report, and you can see that the expectation is that your contact page will have more views or more events triggering than the submission. I mean, that's, you can't have more submissions than the views of the page. So using these two numbers, so we've got 3 form submissions and 39 views of that page for the state rate. So we at least know that the page is working and something clearly happened in September that brought us more traffic.
If we go into media strategy and looking at the funnel, so we looked at website micro conversions, going to macro conversions. You can also look at it using your media strategy. And again, there's so many different ways to skin this based on what channels you are on, where you're trying to reach your audiences. But if we start at the bottom and say we want to drive awareness, so if someone sees a piece of content coming through display, social media, they see it and they think this speaks to me. It's something that I need, and we look at that as a visible impression. Next thing is looking at other channels where we're driving a bit of interest. So, they could be searching for it, and we utilize SEO, paid search, to get them to the website. So they're an engaged visitor, as well as a channel like YouTube. So we've driven that awareness. We're going to the next stage. Next step is they want to find out more. So they're going to start doing the research on it. So there's very clear intent, which again is coming to your paid SEO, YouTube, LinkedIn. They could be looking on LinkedIn, researching whether it is people within the business, the company. From a YouTube perspective, it could be looking at how to do certain things. Um, and then it's I need help. So they've gone through all these phases where it's okay. I I need this business to help me with what I need, um, and it's a lead. It could be them submitting their contact details. They could do a search where they now know they want your to buy into your brand, or it could be a LinkedIn ad where they see they've seen different parts of what you've got to offer, and they may submit a lead depending on what you where you are active, and then ultimately the conversion is yes, I've bought into it, it's a deal. But again, there are very different ways that this can be driven. But I think it's important to go there are different phases and there are different ways to utilize the channels you're on.
Elena mentioned in terms of search. So I think what's happened when Google Ads was, like 5 to 10 to 15 years ago, I think it was quite easy to generate leads. So everybody was sort of stuck in that, like, I've got a problem and I'm researching phase. And paid search worked really well there because it was quite affordable. It was very easy to get into Google Ads. So in terms of media plans, we've seen a lot of clients just focus on Google Ads and search. Like that's been a big focus. And so everybody was sort of playing in this research and interest phase, and everybody was over relying on Google Ads and SEO basically. And what we've seen play out in the last 3 years is a bigger focus on email, so right at the top. So in that consideration phase, just before somebody turns into a lead, I think there's been a refocus on email. And for example, HubSpot and Mailchimp has played into that. So there's been a bigger focus on that, and then the brand searches that happen there. And I think what we're seeing in the industry is that Google Ads search has become incredibly expensive in terms of minimums. So just to have your ad trigger, it's like 20, 30, 40 Rand just to have your ad show up. And the keywords that you're targeting is not necessarily where you're going to show up. So what's happened is, I think a lot of the people that we talk to are like, geez, like this is really expensive now. We can't just be doing that. So they've switched over to do some Facebook advertising, and I think TikTok is coming to play as well, and YouTube as well. But what's very important, what I think we want to just share is those channels sit a little bit higher in the awareness phase, so like higher up early in the purchasing process, and you're not necessarily going to get the sale from Facebook or from TikTok, but that is where you drive people into the funnel, and then from that point on, Google Ads and search will land the lead for you.
Yeah, and I think to the point around paid search and how it's evolved in the Google space, I think SEO is also really important to get right. And I think especially when you're looking from a startup phase and medium-sized business, is that the value in SEO from a long-term effect is important, to be able to optimize that.
So in terms of so we found two ways to justify the investment in this awareness phase. So the first one is to build that dashboard. So it sort of it I think the people that sign the checks, that own the budget, can then see how this funnel is being loaded and it's generating leads. So I think that helps, just visualizing it and saying like we spend money in Facebook or we spend money in TikTok, and it's driving engagement, which drives micro conversions and drives leads. So that's the first thing. So that helps. The second thing that we found helps is that when you run an awareness campaign, the KPI can't be to generate a lead. Ultimately, it is, but it's almost like a soccer team. You need defenders and you need midfielders as well for the guy to score the goal. So Google Ads and SEO usually scores the goal on the search terms. And what's important is that the awareness campaigns drive that behavior. And and one of the ways to just know if one of the awareness campaigns is successful is to choose a different KPI. So Google Ads, I think the KPI is good. It needs to be leads. With SEO, it needs to be leads. But when you start looking at channels like Facebook or TikTok, the person isn't going to buy. They're not in a space of buying. So you need to change and choose a different KPI. So Elena there at the bottom chose an impression. So an impression, a viewable impression, is one of the good metrics that you can use for that. Not just an impression, a viewed impression. So that's the first good KPI for that stage. And then the second one is an engaged visitor, not a click, an engaged visitor. That is another good metric that you can use to measure the success of those awareness campaigns. So for example, if you're running a campaign on Instagram, like the impressions are great, like look at them, but the key thing is, are people engaging with the content, and do they click through to the website and browse and look at your new product or your new service? So that's a really good KPI. You're not going to get the lead. And then, so what we've seen time again is like client goes, we want to run an awareness campaign and it's going to have to generate sales. And then it doesn't generate sales, and everybody's like, it doesn't work. And it's the problem is that you're looking at the wrong KPI there. It's very important to set the right KPI and the right expectation at the start.
Important to note is that from a budget allocation perspective, you want to allocate your budget to where you're going to be able to drive those conversions. So looking at it in a waterfall effect. So going, let's start with that upper level of the funnel to see, can we convert in that top phase, and then build that down. So I'll show you practically to see how that can come out. So if we look at a media plan, so for example, a startup, you have access to um, a lot of data. You understand quite clearly who you want to target. So you want to put a lot more money behind pushing that deal, whether it's email, it's a meeting, it's the production of it. um, you have that database where you can target potential customers on LinkedIn. So you're pushing them into that lead phase, and it's people that you've already got in your database, and then filtering that down, because you may drive less money from an awareness and interest perspective, because as a startup you have less budget, so you want to utilize the data you've got to see a better conversion rate. This looks very different from a corporate side. So, it's a lot harder in terms of reaching the full base of customers. So, you wouldn't be a lot as agile and nimble as a startup would be. So, you would allocate a lot more budget from an awareness perspective. So, if you look at financial services brands, you'll often see a lot of that drive is on social media, paid search, where you want to compete with different financial service brands in the space, and target people there. So it is a very different way in terms of how you would allocate that budget. But it is important to look at this to go, we've looked at the funnel and we've gone, there is that awareness, there is that interest, there's that research, there's that consideration. And how do you take that and map that into a media plan where you aren't trying to be everything to everyone, or going, I need to be on display, or I need to have paid search, but there isn't really um, a plan behind that or a strategy behind that. And I think it's quite important that from a search perspective, specifically from a consideration, that's very limited to brand search. So it is very much it's not a generic keyword. They are looking for your brand. So there is that intent where they're going to hopefully convert to a lead.
And in terms of budget allocation, what Elena explained was, if you start up, the stuff at the top, the email, for example, that's going to deliver the greatest ROI. So spend all the money there. And when you've got that going, then start looking at search and SEO, etc. And what happens is, so when you start off, like that's where the investment needs to happen. And then for corporates, I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of, or they invest heavily in the awareness phase and to make sure that their brand awareness stays, so that they still have competitive advantage there, so people know about them. So that's why we said the media plans sort of differ between the different life cycles of a business. So if, for example, the business is a startup or small, then investment in email and search and SEO is a good idea. And then once that's like bedded down, then the shift moves to awareness as well. So when you start up, we also don't recommend to go into the awareness phase, because like you don't have the other media channels in place to actually turn them into a lead.
Talking reporting. So like I mentioned earlier, if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. So you obviously need to be able to visualize your reporting. So in GA4, this is what it looks like. I've shown this just now. But this is actually very isolated. It doesn't show you in context what you're looking at. I mean, if you actually see these reports independently of each other. They don't sit side by side. So what we recommend doing is using something as simple as Looker. This is a really quick example of a report. It literally took me 15 minutes to make this. That's why it doesn't look as pretty. I'm not a designer. But if you spend some time thinking about what you want to measure, so the data points you want to measure, you can just put them into a funnel, just putting them upside down, saying views being how many times the page is viewed, contact page view, which is the one we specifically want to measure, and then contact form submission. You can then also use Looker's ability to do calculated metrics. So we've got engagement rate and conversion rate, which you can then also map out. So if you look at the first graph there on the right, we've got the conversion rate, which is a nice place to monitor and see the health of what your website's doing. You can then add in other things. So I just had it as an example, is that you can then also measure your traffic. So you can see that email is quite big for us. I mean, that's also why our funnel works the way it does, is because email's at the top, it's closer to the conversion point. We also can map out where in the world people are coming from. So if you are an international business and you are servicing other countries, clicking on that map will then allow you to filter to see which region is performing better relative to other ones. And then Looker Studio is one of my favorite things to do. I'll be honest, I'm quite biased about it. It is very flexible. You can put it in a way that you want to see it, as well as putting it in the funnel, like how I've got it there with those 3 blocks, makes it visually visible. Visually visible makes it visible that things are going well or not. It's as easy as that. And in the next slide, it can get a little bit more complicated. So the more data points you add, the more your funnel will expand, the more data points need to be monitored and measured. So instead of using graphs, you could then use the percentages. So whether it's going up or going down. And then in terms of your micro conversions, you could then also group them together. So this is a really nice example, is that your site traffic is more than just visitors. It's the number of people, how frequent it is, how many pages they're viewing. And those things can be grouped together under site traffic. Then your site engagement. So what are they doing? So that is actually your micro conversions, your file download and your menu inquiry clicks. But then there's also your actual micro conversions, which is your phone clicks, your logins, and your subscriptions, and then your macro conversions or your KPIs, depending on the language your business uses. We've got our inquiries there. So you can see that stacking it this way does give you a visual representation of how things are going. And I think that's a really nice way to do it. Is other examples I just stole off the internet is you don't need to use the triangle. Let's be honest. It can be a vertical stack. So I really like the one on the left there, where the 4 smaller blocks build up to the one big block. So that is a website that is all about views. So getting people to actually view content and engage with it. And the one on the right here is actually from Looker Studio's Google Ads template, which they've grouped them together in terms of how you perform with your clicks versus your conversions and then your costs. So grouping them together and putting them next to each other in a visual representation makes it a lot easier to analyze and makes it a lot more fun rather than reading an Excel spreadsheet.
So you can also look at an audience's funnel. So where you can bucket it, and again using the same funnel approach where you're looking at all visitors. And this is an example we had done for a client. So you'll see there you've got in that second phase, it's segmenting banking users, fintech, insurance, and then again going further up the funnel, form start users, newsletter signups, then form submit success, and going up where eventually you've got an audience of logged in users. So again, it's also segmenting your audiences into a funnel as well, which I think is really really valuable.
Can I add
Sheldon,
my two
Ferdy,
cents?
yeah, please.
So the really nice part about when I said that you should have an event for every measurable point that you want. In GA4, it's really, really easy to build an audience off every one of those events. It's actually 2 clicks and you have your event, you have your audience for that event. So they tie together really nicely in that if you have a data point that's measurable, you can use it multiple ways. If you are planning on using it in GA, if you are planning on measuring with GA4, using it in Google Ads is really, really simple. You literally just import the audience and you can use it almost instantly, provided you reach your minimum number of users. The part I wanted to add in is this is an example that we've got from a client. Your funnel could be 2 steps. It's people visiting your website, filling out a form. They might not be as complicated as it needs to be. Or it could be much more complicated in that if a person dials or clicks on your phone number but doesn't get through, how fast should you react to them? Like you could have an audience of people who've clicked on your phone number or clicked on an email address but not gotten to the conversion point, or they haven't gotten in touch with you. You can then decide, do we show them a specific ad saying here's a discount? Like those are the sort of activations you can do. And that all then runs through Google Ads, which is very useful and quite powerful.
I think it's really, I think Sheldon, what you showed us culminated so well in terms of where, we started to go. Just to recap, where it's setting your strategy and going, what does the client need? What are you trying to achieve? Working with different areas of the business, understanding what access to data you have so that you can map out that strategy properly. And I think, whether, like Sheldon said, the ultimate, the end report doesn't necessarily need to look like the funnel, but just so that it's planned, so that you've got what you're trying to achieve where, and that you can report on that and optimize it, so that at the end of the day, you can show value for where budget's being spent, and that not all budget is going to result in a lead or that macro conversion. And I think that's really important. Is a lot of businesses will go, well, where's the marketing budget going? What leads did we get? And it's going, well, this is where we've spent budget, and there is an element of awareness or research or intent, and this amount was spent to drive leads, and this is what we've gotten. So it does, to visually show it like that, sometimes where people who don't understand marketing can then understand what what's being spent where. And I think that's really important, and then ultimately for it to be shown in a report that it's digestible, and everyone can be able to see what's being done and where, so that again you can optimize and you can tweak. And I think that's the beauty of being in the online space, is that you are able to adjust. You can adjust your budget, you can adjust your content, and you can test and see what works.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Elena and Sheldon.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank you.
joining.
Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you.